CEO, Job van der Voort. Job, fantastic to have you with us. Now, we lost a bit of time because what we were going to do was introduce you with the royal recommendation that I know you got and how we originally introduced it. Our regular viewers will know that. So congratulations on that front. Just explain your mission, because it's about, I think, simplifying the process of hiring talent wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, exactly. We very much believe that talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't yet. And so we want to bridge that gap and make it possible for any company anywhere to hire any individual anywhere. And so that's exactly what we do.
Okay, so talk to me about how the process actually works, because for most people, I think we have to be careful about confusing working from home versus what you perceive to be remote work. And I think the challenges of finding that talent and automating, I think, many of the processes, the payroll, the visas, whatever it is, in order to actually get those people working for a business. So talk to me about what makes you unique in this regard.
Yeah, so if you want to hire, let's say you're an American organization, you want to hire someone in another country, let's say you're in the Netherlands, normally what you would do is you would have to operate as a Dutch company and figure out how to run payroll and taxes and everything else here. And so what we did is we set up operations in most countries around the world, and we do that for you. So you come to us, you say, this is Jane, I want to hire her, she lives in the Netherlands, and then we take care of everything that is necessary for you to be able to hire her. And we do that with, blood, sweat, and tears first, and now more and more software and automation.
I mean, you also offer for contractors, I know, that work for you, they can receive currency payments in a whole host of different currencies. So wherever they are deciding to remote in from, they can be paid. I know your US users as well can be paid in cryptocurrencies, I believe, as well. Does anyone actually take cryptocurrency anymore?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the circumstances of the individual. We see that a small percentage of people actually like to be paid in crypto. I think the more interesting thing is that we see a lot of people in countries with extremely high inflation, which more and more countries are, they choose to receive a different currency than their local currency, for example, US dollar, even though they might be in Latin America.
Oh, so that's really interesting. So workers actually choosing to be paid in US dollars and taking the currency risk because they think that the dollar is going to strengthen relative to perhaps wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to me about your growth, because you are seeing astonishing levels of growth.
Yeah, we founded the company in 2019, and for the first year we were just setting up the company, and the company didn't grow very much. But then the pandemic happened. Everybody started working remotely. We are remote.com, so we had to grow to meet that demand. And so we went in about a year from, I would say, 50 to about 1,000 employees, which was quite a journey.
Of course, I mean, it's barely able to keep up. Okay, so fast forward to today, and Elon Musk is potentially, we're confused about what he's going to do in terms of the size of workforce, but he is saying to everybody else, you need to be in the building. What does this sort of post-pandemic environment, and I know it's different around the globe, mean for remote, in your view?
Yeah. The beautiful thing that we're seeing is that the leverage that employers used to have, which is, if you work for me, you come to my office. And if you don't live close to me, you want to work for me, you move to me. That has changed completely. And so what happens now is that individuals that say, well, I don't want to work from an office, then there are now thousands and thousands of employers that say, well, you can work remotely for me and you don't have to work for that employer anymore. And so that leverage, the change in leverage has completely changed the global hiring market. And we see that, great employers are saying, well, you can work remotely for us, and they will attract the best talent. And then if you really do want to work for a Twitter or some other organization, yeah, you'll have to work from an office. But the moment that you move out of wherever they are located, now there's thousands of alternative employers that also pay well, that also have great work, that also allow you to grow in your career.
It sort of works in a strong jobs environment. Does it work in a recessionary environment where some of that power that workers have today shifts back to the employer?
Nothing really changes, because if you are an employer and you're struggling to hire people, you will always have this option for you. And like the cost of hiring remotely is less than the cost of working from an office, right? Because people work from wherever they live, the cost of living might be lower, plus you don't have to pay for an office. And so even though we see more employers going through layoffs and through reduction in forces, for example, we also see a greater demand for remote work than ever before.
I have about 10 seconds. Are you profitable? I know you're in growth phase, but are you profitable?
It's a choice you make as a business, and that's not the choice for us to make right now.
Okay, I have a million more questions for you. Come back and talk to us. Forgive me because I don't have enough time today because of breaking news, but we shall reconvene. Great to chat to you. Thank you for
Thanks so
that.
much.
Okay, just ahead on First Move, a call to Earth. We cross the world for a special look at the wonders of our oceans.
Hi, my name is Tony.
Above or below the waves. Despite this, the oceans are under threat like never before, whether from overfishing, pollution, or climate change. But all hope is not lost. Across the globe, men and women are fighting to prevent and even reverse the damage. Today, CNN is hosting its second annual Call to Earth Day, focusing on all of those efforts. From Beijing to Mexico, we have reporters covering the story all around the globe. And our David Mackenzie is on Hot Bay Beach in Cape Town, South Africa, and he's with a charity that works with children to make sure everyone feels connected to the ocean. David, I'm assuming that means even cleaning up some of those beaches, and it looks beautiful behind you.
It's a gorgeous beach. It's one of the most famous in Cape Town, Julia. And behind me, the Sentinel Ocean Alliance and their education program. You know, you came to me right at exactly the right time. They have children coming here twice a week to do this kind of education. They aren't just cleaning up the plastic. They're taking notes, indicating what they are finding on this beach and why maybe it's dangerous for the marine life in this area. This is at least an 8-week program. Part of it's education. Part of it is then learning to surf and to swim and to respect the ocean. Here in South Africa particularly, and around the world, there is a sense that many communities don't benefit from the ocean. This is near a kind of millionaire's mile where very wealthy people live, and often the communities that flank this bay don't feel part of this. I spoke to an ocean educator here who says it's important that everyone feels connected and learns about this great asset. So many people in this country haven't always had access to the ocean. Why is it important to introduce people to the ocean and explain what it's all about?
To be honest, I'm one of those people that grew up not having access to the ocean. And I feel like it is important to give the kids of today or the youth of today access to the ocean because they need to understand how beautiful the oceans are, that the ocean can bring more to them.
But there are people living in formal settlements who don't feel necessarily welcome here all the time. So why is it important to change that?
So it's very important to change that because this is not only the ocean for a certain group of people, it's the ocean for all of us.
And when your kids first arrive, compared to when they've spent a few months with you.
That's absolutely correct. I want to weigh in on what they're talking about here pertaining to environmentals. Being a conservationist, looking out for what we're doing to each other and what we're doing to the planet. You know, if you think about it, God, which I know a lot of people don't believe in, He gave all of us something to connect with pertaining to having the same moon, the same stars, the same sun, the same atmosphere, the same planet. So we do have all that in common. In addition to we all breathe the same air, we're all that's living on this part of the earth. And whenever you get to looking at the positives versus the negatives, in actuality, we've got a whole lot more positives working for us today because of modern day advanced satellites and space technology that we can actually zoom in on various planets as well as our own, and we can identify what's happening, where it's happening, when it's happening. So we have all these things that are in common. And why the people cannot come together in achieving the global achievements of today is still bewildering to me, because it only has to be because of the Luciferian Lucifer that is out to kill, steal, and destroy, which is the author of confusion that has caused this mayhem, this anarchy that has befallen upon to not only the American government, but almost all of them. If we're going to survive this storm that we are in, we are going to have to put our minds and our hearts and our heads together in trying to identify where the sources of good is and where the sources of bad are, stay away from the bad, and indulge into the good. If not, we're on our way to doom.
What is the difference you see?
Oh, we see a lot of difference. When the kids arrive, the first thing, when I ask them to pick up plastic that they see in the garden or somewhere, oh no, I'm not going to pick it up. It's not mine. Why should I be the one picking it up? Why is this one not picking it up? So we see that behavior because they're used to not picking up something that is not theirs. As long as it's not mine, I'm not going to pick it up. So you see a lot of behavioral change because now that they know the ocean, they understand the ocean, they're connected to the ocean, they see the value of protecting and saving it.
What is the message you'd like to give?
The ocean is not just the ocean. The ocean is the lungs of the planet Earth, that as the high tides come in, the low tides go out. And it's almost like either a breathing mechanism, or let's use another terminology, it's almost like your washer that you wash clothes with. Most washers don't stay in one place. They move back and
they
forth.
give us life.
They cycle.
We
That's the same thing as our planet, our oceans, because they're constantly cycling towards sifting out some of the bad while enlightening some of the good. And whenever you have more of the bad than you have good, then you got problems.
It also is a massive carbon sink to help us combat what is a very real existential threat for our planet. But, you know, I grew up in this town, this city. It's incredible to see these communities, these kids coming out on these extensive programs, learning to care for the oceans, to get rid of plastic. And really, you wish more people were this committed to doing this kind of work. Julia?
Yeah, what a magical place to grow up, and how incredible to see them caring for something so beautiful and so vital too. And we don't talk about our oceans enough, to your point. David, thank you for that. David Mackenzie there. Now from the coast of Cape Town now to the waters of South America and in Patagonia, delicate marine ecosystems thrive in glaciers and lakes. Scientists, of course, though, still have a lot to learn about what's out there and how human behaviour is impacting life in the fjords. Biologist and Rolex Awards laureate Verena Hauserman shows us just what's at stake.
For me, Patagonia is the most beautiful part of Chile. It's a very remote, very wild and rugged coastline, full of green forest, temperate rainforest, has lots of glaciers, rivers, lakes, and the coast is very steep. The marine life came from deep waters, but also from adjacent areas. And so the diversity we find in fjords is elevated compared to other coastlines. My name is Vreni Hauserman. I'm a scientist working at the University of San Sebastian, and I'm studying the marine biodiversity of Chilean Patagonia. Diving in Patagonia, we found many species that haven't been described before. The coastline is more than 100,000 kilometers, which is twice around the world. There are only a handful of scientists working there. So even if we studied all the main areas, there are still most parts that we don't know yet. Chilean Patagonia was free of human impact for a long time, but in the 80s, when aquaculture moved in, it started to be impacted. Life in the fjords has been reduced in abundance. There are species we hardly don't find anymore. By impacting an area where we know very little about, we always have the risk that we are damaging ecosystems and the equilibrium of the ecosystems is lost. I hope that humanity understands the need of protect our planet. I hope humanity understands the need of protecting the oceans and Our lives and the lives of all future generations depend on a healthy ocean and a healthy planet.
And if you'd like to share your thoughts about raising awareness on environmental issues, you can head to our special page, cnn.com/call-to-earth-day.
From white sand beaches and boutique bungalows perched above a crystal clear ocean, to a call to prayer from centuries-old mosques and festivals brought to life through drums. Get a new perspective of island life.
Our amazing planet. Researchers at UNESCO say that glaciers in 1/3 of the planet's most beautiful parks and protected areas are set to disappear in our lifetime, whether or not we slow global warming. The ice sheets of Yosemite and Yellowstone National Parks are among those at risk of vanishing too by 2050. The report says global warming needs to be limited, as we know, to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels if some of the Earth's other glaciers are to even stand a chance. And that's it for the show. If you've missed any of our interviews today, they will be on my Twitter and Instagram pages. You can search for @JChatterleyCNN. In the meantime, Connect the World with Becky Anderson is up next, and I'll see you tomorrow.
As concerns for the environment grow and our societies become more digitalized, NGK Insulators have created groundbreaking ceramic products for a sustainable and connected future. NGK Insulators, surprising ceramics.
Meet Martha. Martha is 75 years old.
Absolutely. Sylvia Earle, Diving for Hope, today on CNN.
The world's oceans are impacted by all of us, no matter where we live. From what we buy, to what we eat, to how we go about our daily lives. It all flows to our oceans, and keeping them clean and healthy is critical for everyone and everything. Join us for Call to Earth Day and find out how you can turn the tide. Today on CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source. This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Becky Anderson. Hello and welcome to Connect the World. And we start with breaking news from Pakistan. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan was shot in the foot at a rally this afternoon. A spokesman for his party called it an assassination attempt. This video shows an injured Khan getting into a car after the attack. He is being treated in Lahore. Several other people were also shot. One of them has died, we're told. Let's get straight to Sophia Safi, who is in Islamabad in Pakistan.
I'm going to go forward here. A lot of tension in all these different countries because of what's going on right now. People's lives are being taken out of
North Korea,
normalcy, and because of it, they're lashing out. Let's see what this guy over here is doing now, pertaining to
in March.
Kim Jong-un, or whatever his name is.
The kind of weapon experts say could carry several nuclear weapons thousands of miles. Well, Thursday's tests come a day after the regime fired nearly 24 short-range ballistic missiles, prompting Washington and Seoul to extend joint military drills indefinitely. Let's get right to CNN's Will Ripley, who is standing by in Seoul. What do we make of this, Will?
It's certainly a fast-moving and escalating situation here on the Korean Peninsula, Becky. The fact that within 1 hour of North Korea issuing a statement blasting the decision by the U.S. and South Korea to extend indefinitely those joint military exercises, saying it's a very dangerous and wrong decision, then within an hour you have these 3 short-range ballistic missiles fired, yet another violation of UN Security Council resolutions on the heels of what is presumed to be the failed test launch of North Korea's most powerful missile ever made, the Hwasong-17, that was bound on a very provocative trajectory over Japan, but it didn't make it. In South Korea, where North Korean nuclear threats often feel like background noise, this startling sound.
공개가 됐습니다. 경찰에 112 신고가 6시 때부터 시작이 됐죠. 잠시만요. 지금
The first air raid sirens in 6 years, urging Ulungdo residents to seek shelter in underground bunkers. A North Korean missile came dangerously close to the island, crossing the northern limit line, a de facto maritime buffer zone between the north and the south. Pyongyang never officially recognized that line. Until Wednesday, they never fired a missile over it either. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol holding to his hawkish stance on North Korea, calling the launch an effective territorial invasion. The missile actually fell just shy of the South's territorial waters. He infuriated North Korea this week, forging ahead with Operation Vigilant Storm, South Korea's largest combined military air drills with the U.S., 5 days of war games, 240 aircraft, thousands of service members from both countries. Pyongyang's foreign ministry promising powerful follow-up measures. For the Korean Peninsula, a day of unnerving firsts. The first time North Korea launched at least 23 missiles in a single day, skyrocketing tensions to levels unseen in half a decade. The first time South Korea and the U.S. responded by firing surface-to-air missiles near the North's territorial waters. CNN counts 29 North Korean missile launch events this year, including a barrage of 8 missiles in a single day back in June, and October's highly provocative ballistic missile launch over Japan. Triggering a rare nationwide emergency alert. Japan strongly condemning the latest launches, calling the blitz utterly unacceptable, violating UN Security Council resolutions at an unprecedentedly high frequency. Tokyo's solemn protest via diplomatic channels in Beijing apparently falling on deaf ears. China and Russia have veto power at the UN Security Council, both in no mood to work with the West on punishing Pyongyang as they bolster their authoritarian alliance. So clearly, Kim Jong-un feels he can do this unabated because he attempted and failed to launch his Hwasong-17 over Japan, which once again triggered air raid sirens in parts of Japan, Becky. It is truly an extraordinary situation because Kim Jong-un knows that, she and Putin are not going to cooperate with the United States, which is urging China and Russia to put more pressure on North Korea to improve and enhance the existing sanctions that arguably aren't really having much of an impact on their nuclear program anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Will Ripley on the story for you. Thank you, Will. To Israel now, where near final results from Tuesday's election show former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu poised to return to power, backed by a bloc of far-right ultra-nationalists. Israeli media report Netanyahu has already started talks with coalition partners to form a new government, and some of them are already talking about the future. Right-wing Jewish Power Party leader Itamar Ben-Gvir, who wants to be Israel's public security minister, leading the police, tweeting today, "The time has come to impose order here. The time has come for there to be a landlord." Well, this is a big moment for Israel and the region. The surge at the far right is sure to heighten Palestinian-Israeli tensions and possibly impact Israel's improving relations with its Middle East neighbours. Hadas Gold connecting us from Jerusalem. Hadas.
Yeah, Becky, we are expecting the final results to come in the next few minutes. And it is possible that Benjamin Netanyahu's bloc may lose a seat and have 64 seats instead of 65, but still, it will be quite the majority there. And as you noted, really supported by the far right group. It's the Jewish Power / Religious Zionism group that is expected to get 14 seats in the Israeli parliament. That would make them the third largest bloc in the Israeli parliament. So now, as these coalition talks will be completed, and then it will become the question of what sort of positions will these figures get? Because as you noted, people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, they want to be in charge of police. That could potentially be a very controversial position, especially considering that being in charge of police would also mean that he would be in charge of police in places like East Jerusalem, in places like the holiest sites. And this is somebody who has gone into East Jerusalem during clashes between Palestinians and Israelis and pulled his gun and called on police to shoot Arabs who he said were throwing stones. Will Netanyahu heed their calls because they are really holding up his government, or will he try to do something else? This will likely be the most far-right government in Israeli history. One thing, though, that I find really notable, Becky, is when you dig into the numbers of the results, you look at the actual vote counts, you find that when you break down votes based off of if they were essentially pro-Netanyahu or anti-Netanyahu, the difference between the two sides is only something like less than 10,000 actual votes. So why then, if there's only a difference of 10,000 votes, does the Benjamin Netanyahu side have so many more seats in parliament? And that's because Benjamin Netanyahu was managed to sort of cohesively bring together all the right-wing blocs, and now there will essentially be only 4 parties in this coalition. When you look on the other side, on essentially the anti-Bibi side, there were all of these smaller parties that fractured. And in the Israeli electoral system, if a party doesn't get enough votes, it doesn't pass a threshold, and it doesn't enter parliament, and essentially those votes are wasted. And so that's why when you look at the actual numbers, it's not that, 65% of the Israeli voters wanted the pro-Netanyahu bloc. It's the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu, he's an expert politician, managed to really bring all the right wing together and managed to create what will be the most right-wing government likely in Israeli history.
Yeah, that is gold on the story for you. And you can get more on the website, including a closer look at Netanyahu's extremist allies and how they focus on so-called settler politics to win support. That is on the digital site or through your CNN app on your smartphone. Well, to Iran, where the United Nations says an alarming number of people have been arrested in the anti-government protests that have been sweeping that country. UN Special Rapporteur on Iran says security forces there have arrested as many as 14,000 people. Javed Rahman says at least 277 people have died as authorities use force to crush dissent. He referenced Iran's decision to hold public trials for 1,000 people arrested. Some carry the death penalty. Meanwhile, the United States says it will work to remove Iran from the UN Commission on the Status of Women. It says no nation that abuses the rights of women and girls should play a role in any UN or international body charged with protecting those rights. Those nationwide protests are now in their 7th week, no signs of slowing down. The demonstrations sparked, of course, by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in the custody of Iran's so-called morality police. Former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton says the unrest in Iran has been brewing for many years. A high-profile Democrat and former First Lady says young people today are not willing to give up their freedom. Speaking to CNN earlier, she also commended Iranian women for standing up for their rights. Have a listen.
But I think what we're seeing in Iran has been brewing for many years. And young people who are connected to the rest of the world, who get to travel to some extent, certainly online, if not in reality, are just not willing to live with the loss of freedom that is imposed upon them. So we are speaking out. It is something that, again, has to be calculated carefully because the regime is most likely to be softened up and give in to internal pressures from people saying, you picked up my granddaughter on the street, how dare you? Or, my wife is at home crying because she's worried about our children. Something that is building up inside Iran. I think it would be a mistake for there to be external signs of pressure or security that came from the outside, while this is still bubbling within Iran. So we have to do everything we can overtly to speak up, speak out, stand with the young women, and have the media continue to cover it. I mean, I'm supporting a group called the Iranian Diaspora Collective, which is a group of Iranian Americans, some Iranians who have also been based in Europe, and even people inside Iran who are trying to get the word out. Things are happening literally hour by hour. So I would plead that, you know, CNN continue to cover what's going on in Iran, keep shining a bright light. I think the pressure is going to have an effect.
Hillary Clinton speaking to my colleagues at CNN this morning, earlier. Well, coming up, mixed messages on the ground in Ukraine's southern Kherson region amid signs a major battle there may be brewing. And Joe Biden tells American voters that democracy is on the ballot in the midterm elections. Is his message getting through? And we all rely on our oceans. Now they're under threat like never before. So we're going to take a look at efforts to change that. Here in the UAE, as CNN hosts our second annual Call to Earth Day. That is coming up this hour.
It seems like every country, the people have become over exhilarated because of whatever reason, and now you're seeing these tremendous movements that are happening, just like Hillary Clinton was talking about, pertaining to a evil regime over in that area.
In any mass withdrawal of Moscow's forces. It comes as Russia continues pounding water and energy infrastructure throughout Ukraine. Kyiv says the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has again been disconnected from the grid due to Russian shelling. CNN's Salma Abdulaziz joining me now live from Kyiv. Let's start with the situation on the ground in Kherson. Just explain what we understand and indeed what isn't clear at this point.
Absolutely. So we have new information coming in today. This is after a Russian-backed official in Kherson spoke to Russian television saying that it is, quote, most likely that Russian forces could pull out potentially from Kherson. Now, there's no indication they are doing that, but we also saw social media video rather, showing that the Russian flag over the main administrative building in Kherson has been taken down. Now, to contextualize this for our viewers, Becky, this is an important battle that is gearing up here for Kherson. That is absolutely the next stage in Ukraine's counteroffensive in the attempt to regain their territory. But I will be clear here, Becky, President Putin is not going to back down from Kherson easily. If you take a look at a map, Kherson is absolutely critical. It connects Crimea, Russian-occupied Crimea, of course, right on the Black Sea, to the rest of those Russian-occupied territories, Mariupol, Donbass, right up to the Russian border. And it's extremely symbolic. It was the first city taken by Russian forces just about a week into this offensive. So no signs yet, but both sides digging in, fortifying their positions. Potentially here, we're hearing reports of Russian troops pulling back, but as I said, I would take that with a grain of salt. Now, I want to go on to those infrastructure strikes that we've seen happening again overnight. This city in particular, Kyiv, witnessed unprecedented havoc this week. We visited a hospital, one of 4 hospitals that lost water for a full day, to get a sense of the impact. Becky, take a look. Dialysis patients like these need running water for their treatment. So when Russia targeted Kyiv's infrastructure Monday, lives hung in the balance.
One patient here needs at least 4 hours and almost 300 liters of water.
300
for
liters
one procedure
of water.
of running water. For one day, we had no water at all in this unit. That's just very dangerous to their health.
For the first time since the start of the conflict, 4 of the capital's biggest hospitals were left without running water for most of a day. The Kyiv Regional Clinical Center was among the facilities impacted. Doctors and nurses here scrambled to transfer the most urgent cases.
So we must be prepared to face even the most difficult challenges.
For weeks, Moscow has pounded Ukraine's critical infrastructure, but medical facilities have so far been spared, relying on backup generators during blackouts. This week's strikes were so severe, Kyiv's water pumps stopped working, leaving some 1,500 hospital patients across the city in limbo. This is one of the hospital's sterilization rooms. It's here that staff come to clean surgical equipment. But once the water was cut off, they could no longer do that. That means all non-emergency operations had to be canceled. Hospitals require an enormous amount of water. This one, its officials say, uses some 15 tons per day. The medical director here says it created a huge challenge for her staff. We're ready for emergency situations every day. We can handle power cuts. But the lack of water was absolutely catastrophic for us, she tells me. We had to act quickly. Do you worry that the water system could be cut off again by Russian missiles?
We worry every day.
You worry every day?
Every day and every morning.
For now, the city's water services are restored, but it's a matter of if, not when, Moscow will strike Kyiv's lifelines again. You know, Becky, that doctor then went on to tell me that yes, we're not on the front lines here in Kyiv, but she believes Russia still wants residents here to suffer. She believes that the Kremlin is trying to cut off water, power supplies, basic medical care, and those doctors and nurses, they are preparing for the worst. They say they're putting together evacuation plans, and they're willing to evacuate every last patient if they have to. To them, it's just a matter of if, not when. Becky?
Salma Abdelaziz is in Kyiv for you. Thank you. Well, Friday would have marked 2 full years of a vicious war in Ethiopia between government forces and fighters from the country's northern Tigray region. In a very hopeful turn of events on Wednesday, after more than a week of peace talks, the two sides...
It's remarkable, but ecstatically sad, how that Putin is basically using the Goliath versus the David scenario in pounding them poor people over there in Ukraine, of not recognizing or giving any type of leadway towards innocent men, women, and children pertaining to their civilians. And it reaches the same type of characteristics that I continue to keep talking about pertaining to Saudi Arabia attacking weddings, funerals, hospitals, parks, churches, synagogues, schools, which I thought all this had come to an agreement back after World War II that no government was going to do this to any society. And to me, it has already reached the severity level of being basically another Hitler. The only difference is this Hitler over there today, pertaining to poisonous Putin, has nuclear bombs. And I guarantee you, if the Ukrainians was to start making leaps and bounds in aggressiveness in going and taking back over the areas that Russian took over, to the point that even the Kremlin was in danger. Don't think for a second. Putin may tell you that he's not going to use nuclear bombs, but if he felt like that his great evil empire was in jeopardy, you can bet your bottom dollar that's exactly what he would do. That's the reason why I continue to say that if you're going to defeat something like this, it has to come from within, towards their own people, attacking that cancer or that evil that's within their own country. Because if not, it'll be looked upon as being another violation if another country was to bomb, let's say, the Kremlin, and then it would sure enough be on pertaining to one strike versus another as far as nuclear armament. So, you know, playing this tic-tac-toe, tootsie-wootsy game, walking on eggshells, is unlike anything that I've ever studied or looked upon in all the wars that I've ever looked on and studied, including our own here in America, pertaining to not only the Revolutionary War but the Civil War. But the time period that we're in right now, pertaining to information warfare, also pertaining to disinformation warfare, pertaining to biological warfare and nuclear warfare, is just the very playing card that the Russians love to use, because they're the ones that throwed the first punch. They're the ones that initiated the attack upon the Ukrainians illegitimately. They're the ones that has violated every Geneva law as far as breaking criminal laws in regards towards basically trying to genocide them people over there. But yet, no, if somebody was to really and truly get that frisky with Putin from another country, his retaliation would be the very retaliation that he had done already spoke of before, which was if he felt like that his government, even though it was his government that throwed the first punch illegitimately, that if he felt like that his government was cornered up to the degree of danger, that he would unleash nuclear bombs. So that's where we are, which basically puts us in a position, the world in a position, towards being blackmailed, nuclear blackmail, by a lunatic over there that don't give a damn about men, women, and children's lives, especially those that has never signed up towards being in the military. That, as far as I'm concerned, he should be ranked right up there with the rest of the terrorists, pertaining to not only a terrorist entity that supports terrorism, but now he himself has become, the government itself over there in Russia has become a terrorist government. We already know he's getting artillery, bombs, missiles from Iran and possibly even North Korea. So this thing's turning into a free-for-all. That's the reason why I said what I said yesterday, that there is entirely too many cooks in the kitchen. And it has gotten proportionally out of hand in trying to maintain any type of global order. In addition to seeing the damages not only to the human Homo sapien race, but the damages that they're doing to the trees, their habitat, the ecosystem over there, all the other damages that they're doing to the birds and their whatever kind of livestock that they may have had, in addition to stifling grain supply issues that they supposedly opened up the other day, but then I heard where there was bombs being thrown at them towards trying to stop that from originating. So you just got one exacerbating problem, exacerbating another problem that's intensifying the other problem, that obviously this thing, instead of it cooling off, is only getting that much hotter. in addition to the world trying to solve its own problems pertaining to global warming, pertaining to damaging our ecosystem, either in our oceans, our seas, our air, or our land. So because of these massive, massive movements that are happening all over the planet, it is only a fulfillment of biblical prophecy where it talks about in Revelations of the opening of the first seal, where one of the beasts that remains in heaven, in God's heavenly kingdom, come to the edge of the kingdom and look down and seen what was going on the planet Earth, and said, "Come and see, for it was as the noise of thunder," pertaining to all these different organizations and all these different countries and all these different problems, all basically coming to a head at one time. Coming to a head at one time. So, if that was the gift that Kim Jong-un over there shooting off missiles to this day had in mind towards giving to the world, it's been one of the most sorriest, evilest, Lucifer motivated gift that has ever been given to society. The only thing that would topple that as of right now would either be a nuclear war or a meteor that it talks about in the Bible pertaining to wormwood that would actually come down and hit the planet and cause a third part of all of mankind to die. If that is any ideal towards putting you on the level of what is happening and where it could possibly go in the next few days, in the next few weeks, in the next few months, of putting it in the right perspective of where we are. And that's pretty severe whenever you're talking about the Bible fulfilling itself in regards towards wormwood. And it also talks about not just a few earthquakes, as what Christ talked about in the Gospels, but it also talks about a major earthquake that was unlike any other earthquake that had ever hit the planet. That's, once more, according to the Bible, is going to kill a great deal of people, put a great deal of suffering, and all this could be prevented. All of this could be prevented if somebody wanted to sit down and try to reason with a group of people, regardless whether North Korea, China, regardless whether Africa, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, with all the Taliban over there, or Russia and all the other problems. All this could be prevented. But it seems like the Homo sapiens are dead set towards wanting this to materialize. So if that be the case, which it looks like it is, buckle up, saddle in, because if you think the rough ride has been rough already, pertaining to whatever that you've recently went through just within the past 2 or 3 years since COVID has hit, it's fixing to even get rougher. Coming near a neighborhood near you.
Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi, you're watching Connect the World, and breaking news this hour. Police in Pakistan now have a man in custody suspected of shooting the nation's former Prime Minister Imran Khan in the foot. It happened at a rally earlier today. This is video of the injured Khan getting into a car after the attack. He is now being treated in Lahore. Police say the man they arrested had a 9mm pistol and 2 empty magazines. At least one person was killed and several others were wounded. Well, with the US midterm elections just 5 days away, the country's 2 major parties are making their closing arguments. President Biden delivered an impassioned speech on Wednesday saying Republicans who refuse to accept election results are a threat to democracy. But polls show the issue really motivating voters right now is the economy. You saw former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton speaking about Iran earlier on when she was talking to CNN. She also discussed the Democrats' chances in the upcoming elections. These are midterms, remember, and she said her party has done a poor job so far in telling voters about the work that they have actually done in fighting inflation. Have a listen to what she said.
Well, I always think you have to talk about the economy because that's critical to everybody, whether it's an election year or not. What I wish we could convey more effectively is that if you look at what has been accomplished in the first 2 years of the Biden presidency with the Congress working hand in hand, there has been an enormous amount of commitment of new building, new infrastructure, new investments in manufacturing, new ways to lower healthcare costs. I mean, insulin price going down, drug prescription price going down. In fact, the work that has been done by the Democrats in helping the economy and helping people deal with what is global inflation, not just American inflation, is truly impressive. And we've got to get that message across more effectively.
Well, I wonder why voters aren't getting that. I mean, and listen, here's an example, because you're going to be campaigning with, Governor Kathy Hochul, along with the vice president. You're going to be campaigning for her and Letitia James, meaning Hochul. And, we're talking about a state where you were elected. It is a blue state. And that is a signal that something is amiss here, that Democrats are nervous in a blue state like New York. So why isn't that message getting across? Why is Kathy Hochul, neck and neck with the Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, who is also running for governor?
Well, I think it's more of a turnout issue, Don.
I've already heard various candidates, regardless whether it was Republican or Democrat, that has already basically promised to stonewall this election towards not declaring victory over one or the other to the point of succeeding or exceeding, whatever word that they use, in recognizing that the other group has in fact won the election. And whenever you're dealing with an environment like this, you're no longer dealing with a free, fair, open democracy environment. You're dealing with something else that is in the cooking or in the brewing up, in the works, that is only going to inevitably spell more bloodshed and disaster. And it won't, it in any type of conflict. If you study conflicts all over the world, it usually starts out in a threatening verbal way. And once it exceeds the threatening verbal threats, then it will go into a new level to the degree that it actually becomes a knockdown, drag out. That's basically what started our own Civil War. If you'll get to studying what actually happened in the White House, other than looking at the main theme pertaining to freeing the slaves, but if you'll get to looking at what actually transpired in a group of people that could not get along, they wouldn't compromise. It was over territorial rights that began as a debate or an argument, wound up in a fight, and it went from a fight to an all-out and out war. And we are going down the exact same characteristics today, coming from the White House, of people not getting along, not willing to compromise, people not willing to listen to one another, not using diplomacy strategies. And it's almost as if something has infected the world since COVID has hit, to the degree that now all of a sudden we have went from a global society that was concerned about wanting to save and sustain life, to the point that now we either don't care about life or we're actually willing to take our own lives for the purposes that we believe in. And of course, you can look at Russia, the Russian government over there, and what they're doing to the Ukrainians as being a leading example that they know the consequences in them doing what they're doing. Don't think for a second that their oligarchs hadn't thought this thing through towards what type of severity economically as well as politically and possibly militarily that it would cause to their country, and they was hoping that everybody would cower down to the clingering of threats coming from the evil empire, in thinking that the world was just going to run off, kind of like a dog taking its tail and sticking it between its legs, and flee to the nearest safe haven. That's what poisonous Putin thought. He thought that he was going to be able to go in and initiate this invasion on the Ukrainian people, and within a matter of days, he was going to declare victory. And he was going to beat his chest like a bunch of apes in telling the world how rootless and how bad and how inspiring that him and his evil empire really was. And now we're seeing just the very opposite. We're seeing that his equipment was wore out. We're seeing that the Ukrainians has killed a great deal of the Russian military people. And it's just a matter of time. I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time before the Ukrainians are going to start getting the upper edge overall on all this. And that's whenever they're sure enough going to corner Putin.
In South Africa, that's coming up. And CNN unveils the top 10 heroes of the year. Stay with us to learn how
and as the old saying goes, you can corner a fox to his home, similar towards how that they was trying to do me. I'm going to use now me as an example. I was attacked out here for basically 3 consecutive solid years of various people in the neighborhood that was bringing hardship into our lives or intimidation into our lives. They was trying to provoke my brother and I in me basically running away like a whipped cowardly dog with its tail stuck between its legs, hoping that Juby would go somewhere else and he wouldn't land and dive here. Well, of all places for them to think that, why would have they have thought that, knowing the seeds that I had planted years and years ago towards coming back and seeing the development of those seeds? Because according to the Bible, if you planted seeds and you don't go back and cultivate those seeds or water those seeds, there's no doubt that the seeds that you have planted would die. They'll never come about. And that's exactly what they wanted, and that's the reason why they wanted me out of here. Tommy Moore knew this, the judges and the judicial system knew that, and basically was supporting a group of people that was plotting this type of open public event right here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. And I thought that I had went through some awful events in which I had pertaining to Homeland Security confiscating the sword originally from the Windmill Ministries in 1989, using Madison County Police Force to do so. I thought that I'd went through some very, very touch and go events, like whenever I was up in Washington, D.C. in 1989, up towards the White House, whenever they confiscated my truck and took me to a mental institution for 72 hours because they thought I was whacked. They didn't know what my intentions was towards me wanting to lash out the way that I was lashing out. And it has unbearably went from one extreme to another in my particular life. Let's go back to this real quick.
Lots of people who refuse to accept that, and many who are working to reverse the damage. So that is the focus of this CNN's second annual Call to Earth Day. Living Oceans, Turning the Tide. It is a global day of action aimed at raising awareness of environmental issues and engaging you with conservation education. And our coverage this hour includes Africa and the United States, and indeed the UAE. I want to bring in our reporting team then. CNN's David McKenzie, he's live from Cape Town in South Africa, and Linda Kincaid, my colleague who's standing by at the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta. And Linda, let me start with you. You join us from America's largest aquarium, that's in Georgia, where, as I understand it, staff there working on global conservation efforts right now. Feeding time for the whale sharks. Explain what you are seeing and learning today.
That's right, Becky. It is early lunchtime here for the whale sharks. We are at the top of what is the largest aquatic exhibit in North America. And the whale sharks are, of course, an endangered species. They're about the size of a school bus, but they can grow up to 18, 19 meters in length, weighing about 10,000 kilograms. Now, if you walk with me, you'll see the whale shark is taking in water. It's a filter feeder, so it takes in water. The water escapes through the gills, and they have mouth filters that trap crustacean, plankton, and other marine life. They eat about 20 kilograms a day. Now, they're vulnerable at birth to sharks and other predatory fish. As they are fully grown, they have fewer natural predators, but they are under threat from humans. They are trapped as bycatch, caught accidentally in fishing nets, but also there is high demand for them on international markets for their fins, for their oil, and for their meat. Now, the Georgia Aquarium has been researching whale sharks for some 20 years, and with me now, I want to introduce Dr. Lisa Hoots. Now, Dr. Lisa Hoots is the head of research and conservation at the Georgia Aquarium. Now, you are the only aquarium outside of Asia to care for whale sharks. Just give us a sense of what you've learned, what sort of study you've done in terms of growth, behavior, genetics on whale sharks over the last 20 years.
Yeah, we've done quite a bit of work here through our Georgia Aquarium team, primarily looking at movement and habitat use, how whale sharks spend their time. Do they like to aggregate with other males, other females? Where do they go to? We've done some work looking at deep diving. How deep do they doing down there? We've had a peek at assembling the full genome for the whale shark, trying to get clues into their immune system and the origins of the immune system. Lots of great research happening here.
Incredible research, and it's not just here at the Georgia Aquarium. You also go on expeditions. 2 months ago, you went to the Galapagos, working with local scientists there on a whale shark project, looking at reproductive health of these whale sharks. What sort of tools do you use to gather data, and what have you learned?
Yeah, that's a great question. We use a lot of telemetry or tag technology to attach to the dorsal fin to figure out where the animals are moving. But probably one of the more interesting pieces is we have an underwater ultrasound, and we can actually use that on the females that are swimming by to figure out whether they're pregnant or not. And that helps us figure out why they're using the Galapagos space.
Right.
Yeah, great.
And for those that are wondering why you have these beautiful creatures in captivity, 2 whale sharks, what do you say to them?
Well, I say they're here for a couple of reasons. One, we're trying to capture the hearts and minds of the public to inspire conservation action.
But so some crucial work here at the Georgia Aquarium. Becky Anderson, we will check in with you later in the day, but there's certainly a lot of incredible work, breakthrough science really happening when it comes to whale sharks here at the Georgia Aquarium. Becky?
Amazing. Linda, thank you for that. I want to bring up David, who's, as I say, in Cape Town. And David, we know that there's a next generation of, or there is a generation of youngsters who've been absolutely sort of super glued into how climate change affects our planet. I know that you've been talking to kids who are learning about the ocean where you are. Tell us, what are you learning?
Well, I mean, look at this site behind me, this extraordinarily beautiful spot in Cape Town, Hart Bay. It's really one of the pristine areas of the globe. But across the globe, communities maybe don't feel connected to these places. They feel it's a place of privilege, sometimes a place of danger. But we've been spending time here with the Central Ocean Alliance, which takes children from communities that are marginalized, teaches them about the importance of the ocean, what it can do to mitigate climate change. They were cleaning up plastics earlier. And just, the history of South Africa, even being here as a kid, living and growing up in Cape Town, these were places of exclusion. Now they want to make it a place of inclusion. We spoke to one of their educators. So many people in this country haven't always had access to the ocean. Why is it important to introduce people to the ocean and explain what it's all about?
To be honest, I'm one of those people that grew up not having access to the ocean. And I feel like it is important to give the kids of today or the youth of today access to the ocean, because they need to understand how beautiful the oceans are, that the ocean can bring more to them.
But there are people living in formal settlements who don't feel necessarily welcome here all the time. So why is it important to change that?
So it's very important to change that, because this is not only the ocean for a certain group of people, it's the ocean for all of us.
And when your kids first arrive, compared to when they've spent a few months with you, what is the difference you see?
Oh, we see a lot of difference. When the kids arrive, the first thing, when I ask them to pick up plastic that they see in the garden or somewhere, oh no, I'm not going to pick it up. It's not mine. Why should I be the one picking it up? Why is this?
Okay, I'm going to stop right there because we're basically doing what we've
because
already,
now that they know,
redoing what we've already done, recorded. Getting back to the things that I was talking about a while ago, in trying to help people, save people, regardless whether it was the events that happened in my personal life in 1983 as a telephone call to the White House, or regardless whether it was events that happened to me in 1989 up in Washington, D.C. at the White House, or the events that happened in 1991 in Wheeling, West Virginia, or the other semi-events in 1993, and also long about, let me think, let me put my thinking cap on now. Probably long about 1997, whenever I was living in Jackson, Tennessee, whenever I made a bunch of VHS tapes and put the VHS tapes out, several hundred VHS tapes all over Northwest Tennessee. And then, of course, in 2005 was whenever I stood back up for the ministry again. Like I said, I had to work this in a very, very unpopular way, to the degree that whenever I would stand up for the ministry and I realized that things was getting so proportionally out of hand with all the yik yak and the talk and the controversy, and usually what followed the controversy was persecution, I had learned towards standing up for a while and ducking, basically digging in. And I would dig in for sometimes a few months, sometimes a few years, and then I'd stand back up with the same message. They'd come after me again. I'd have to do it all over again towards ducking down. And I had to simultaneously do this over a period of 30 years, putting out my message. But I never got to put out my message through the front door. I always had to sneak around and put it in through the back door. Matter of fact, Miss McWright, right down the road here, that was married to Hayden McWright, she criticized me on account of that. She said, Dennis, I've never seen nobody try that was inspired towards being a minister or a preacher that had a message to put out, that was doing it the way that you was doing it, towards leaving material at all these churches and then walking away. Well, how else was I supposed to have done it? Was I supposed to have sat there until the preacher or somebody associated with that church wound up getting that material? They know where I lived. I always left a contact number and where I lived and who I was. It wasn't like I was trying to be conspicuous about it towards not letting nobody know who I was and where I lived. So, in actuality, instead of Miss Macwright criticizing Dennis, by Dennis having to use unpopular message tactics to be able to get his message out to the general public towards him being the messenger, the shame should have been thrown off onto the church communities, because the church communities never picked it back up. A matter of fact, all they done was criticize, humiliate, and demonize that much further. And they kept that up for years, talking about me, putting me down. Just like Billy Wally, whenever I met with him shortly after I come back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014, that married Deborah Feeney. He made it a point to tell me, Juby, you have not met no type or form of Antichrist. Really? So now you're going to tell me what I have done or what I didn't do, even though my testimony contradicts that. So that's basically calling me a liar. Billy Wally, that I went to school with, as well as the Bakers, and the main baker was Reuben. He was actually a pallbearer for my brother's death, Douglas Keith Jackson, along with several other ones that's around here that's still living, that knows exactly not only our family history towards the abuse that we had to go through, but they also know the history of this ministry, of how that they did not participate in wanting to help the founder of the Windmill Ministries. Rather, they wanted to degrade the founder, criticize the founder, persecute the founder, ridicule the founder. That now 30 plus years has passed, and we see how that the community responded and reacted whenever I first come back here for about 3 years. It basically costed my brother's death, and not everybody was a participator in this resistance movement towards trying to get Juby to run out of here like a whipped dog. But that was the initial movement in wanting to basically finish me off or provoke me to the point that I or my brother took the law into our own hands and done something that could have very well backfired on us, even if it was conducted on our property, because that's how mixed up and messed up that the law has become in America. In other words, it's got to the point that even though you're protecting yourself on your own property, you're protecting your own domain, your own palace, and in some situations, even in a break-in, you're still the one that owns the property, that owns the palace, that's trying to protect the palace, that winds up going to jail. You may not go to jail for a long length of time, but you still get called on the carpet about how come you had to kill this person. And it's as if the law itself is favoring more towards the criminal in today's society than they are the victim. That's how twisted and messed up that our system has become. And that's another reason why that my brother and I, after I sat down and discussed him about the broken cross and what the cross actually represented, that it really didn't have nothing in the world to do with the salvation of man. The only thing it had to do is that it was part of the system at the time that crucified Christ. And I'm sure if they would have had electric chairs back then, or if they would have used other methods towards hanging people, which they probably did, I don't know, it wasn't predominant at that time, or if they had gas chambers at that time, I'm pretty sure that they would have used that on the Lord Jesus Christ. But it was predicted for Jesus Christ to have hung on a cross, and that not a bone would be broken of his. And those prophecies come true all the way down to the letterhead, which puts us where we are today, which puts me what I'm talking about pertaining to the environment, all these other problems. Like I said, I've tried to help. I've tried to, go on these conquests or these crusades, going up into New York and Washington D.C. and trying to be the great messenger towards putting out the message that in order to be able to take peace from the earth, there had to be peace upon to the earth. But it's very obvious that this generation around here had already been persuaded that I didn't want peace, but in reality, I wanted war. And boy, was they ever going to provoke me to that point, even at the expense of seeing my younger brother die because he could not handle the pressures and the peer pressure that this community had placed up into his life. And to think that these people had the vindicity, the gall, to blame me for that in which what they was doing speaks volumes. Once more, it speaks it speaks volumes about what type of people that I was dealing with to begin with before I ever come back to Tennessee in 2014, and it for darn sure speaks volumes about the type of people that me and my brother was dealing with that led to his early death. And even my cousin Jim Boy acknowledged that yes, he believed that because of all the hullabaloo that broke out down here, either at 430 Beach Grove Road or 291 Thompson Road, that it had a initiating fact in David Jeffrey Jackson's life. The only problem is Jim Wade Jackson, that's J.W. Jackson's son, that's my father's brother, J.W., still wants to look at the glass towards the glass being half empty versus half full, okay? And he still rather put the blame off on his cousin Juby. That way his cousin Juby will feel so bad about himself that his cousin Juby will just either roll over and die, or his cousin Juby will be so ashamed of the fact of that in which what they're trying to promote on my life, that old cousin Juby would just pick up stakes and run off, and that way old Jim Boy can come back here and he can take back over the Jackson farm, that in which what his own brothers and sisters sold rightfully to James Robert Jackson, which was my dad. And that way Jim Jackson would feel like that he was that ape towards being able to beat his chest and say, look what I have done. I have conquered the conqueror. First of all, I'm not the conqueror. It's the spirit that lies within me that is the conqueror. First of all, it's not. Second of all, it's not my message. I'm only the messenger to the message. Okay? And these are all these fictitious stereotype ideals that obviously these people have persuaded themselves in. And to think that my cousin wants to call me a thief, that I illegitimately come in here and took back over this property, why him himself stole probably $2,000 worth of guns that my son and I intended for him to only hold and not take. And to think that he's not willing to either bring the firearms back or at least admit that he's got them, once more speaks volumes about James Wade Jackson. He acknowledged that, yeah, I believe that all the hullabaloo contributed to David Jeffrey Jackson's death. But rather than him be lenient towards his cousin and look at the true facts of how that they was bombarding us right here on the same corner, every event, in every event, it all happened right here. He is so gullible and so naive He refuses to see the truth, and he rather blame his cousin for his own brother's death than he would blame those that initiated this type of adversity into our lives whenever I come back here. It speaks volumes about his demeanor, and it speaks volumes about his motive, and it speaks volumes about him not being a honest, good person, to the degree that he rather put me in the category of me being the monster and the community being the victims versus the other way around. And like I've said, and I'll say again, the courts in Weakley County took a big part. Get on out. Get on out of here. Get on. Get. The courts took a big part in allowing for this stuff to go on. And they can say, well, prove it. Prove it. It's all in my Facebook. It's all in my YouTube platform. I've got DVDs of and recordings of whenever I went into the courtroom of using GoPro. At the time, they wasn't wisened up towards what I was trying to do towards me investigating them, and basically gathering up all this evidence pertaining to what had happened. And even to this day, there's still a few things that there's still a few more rocks that I need to roll over towards getting the truth and the whole truth. And I'm sure that will come out eventually towards me being able to verify my story to the general public, of having hands-on, one-to-one testimonies pertaining to all this that has occurred in the past 30 plus years, plus the life that my family had to go through over post-traumatic stress syndrome, over my father basically becoming possessed of the devil, to the degree that my family and I sat around for years, not weeks, not months, but years, contemplating on who was going to be the trigger man towards walking into the bedroom while he was asleep and taking a double-barrel shotgun and placing it on his neck and activating the gun to the degree of dismembering his head from his body. I couldn't tell you the amount of conversations that we had again and again and again. And I'm pretty sure the Willises knew this. The Bakers knew this. Paul Hill, pertaining to Roger Hill, knew this. Burton Sipes knew this. Probably the Whites knew this. Probably David Jacobs. The Jacobses probably knew this. David did. Maybe not Dickie. Probably Pluger, in which I don't even know if Pluger's still living or not. Tudor Morgan. I could go on and on with names that was very aware of the harsh conditions that the family was having to endure, but nobody was willing to do anything about it. We was on our own, and that's the reason why David, my brother, before he died, told me several different times, Juby, we are similar towards being Holocaust victims. We have went through something that was harsh, and fortunately, God spared us towards us being able to tell our story. Well, David can't tell his story. My brother David is dead at the age of 51, that passed away in the year 2017. But I tell you, somebody that does still have a mouth and does still have air in his lungs and does still want to speak and tell the story, and his name is his older brother, Dennis James Jackson, that was born in 1961 in Waukegan, Illinois, up in the Antioch area, that wound up having to spend about 2 months in being an infant in St. Teresa's Hospital, while God had his protected hand upon me, during which time that I had a kidney removed, that ordinarily they didn't operate on infants that young in 1961. That was, in 1961, that was considered an unprecedented thing to operate on a infant no older than 2 weeks old. And to this day, I still got the scar. It just so happens God placed his hand upon my life. My other kidney so far has been good towards adapting to all the different traumas that I've went through, the body traumas, and so far God's been good enough to me. Every now and then I may get a kidney infection and I drink a lot of cranberry juice or whatever, try to get over it. I've learned my body, learned to listen to the symptoms of your body. And so far at the age of 61, that one kidney is still doing the work that two kidneys should be doing. Only by the hand of God, not by the hand of me. I'm not Superman, like the Green family wanted to project me as while they was going through my material that they was supposed to have retranslated in a more English acceptance type form towards bad grammar and bad English. And to this day, my spelling is still intensely bad. I mean, I can spell cat, dog, you know, different smaller words. And sometimes I can get lucky on some of the bigger ones that spells the way that they sound. But whenever it comes to all the silent E's and O's and I's and sometimes Y and all that other formula that they tried to cram down our throats that we were supposed to have made some sort of a common sense out of, I never did understand it and probably never will. How come you spell a word differently than the way that it sounds? I understand the silent E's and the silent I's and sometimes Y's. I understand that. And those are the parts there that you basically have to memorize to understand. Well, yeah, we know it don't make sense, but you just go ahead and add that syllable in there anyway. But some of these English words, I don't know if the person was drunk. I don't know if they was high. I don't know if they was just in another zone. But some of these English words are just absolutely incredibly spelt that does not make a lot of common sense at all. And I guess that's the difference between having worldly wisdom and godly wisdom, heavenly wisdom. And even the Bible clarifies that the wisdom, the children of this world, pertaining to the wisdom of this world, is actually more wiser than the world above. And the reason why is because we had to become adapted to this world. We had to figure out the different clues towards how that they done different things. And to this day, I still praise smartphone technology because I prayed for that years and years ago. In basically the late 1990s, I had a computer in Rolling Acres, my wife and I did. But once I got on the thing and I got to looking at how wicked that it was pertaining to all the crap that was on there, I basically took the thing and disconnected it and didn't want to have nothing to do with it. But at that time, 20 years ago, they had a program that you could put into your computer called the Dragon, to where you could basically speak and talk or text at your own command. Now somebody has engineered that same technology and they have perfected it and they have put it onto the telephone, smartphone technology, to where just about anybody can talk on their telephone and actually halfway spell out a sentence and make it look like that they're halfway intelligent towards the English language, because the smartphone technology took the place of the Dragon. And I'm sure they probably had another program or two that was named something different before smartphone technology. But I prayed many a prayer. God, the only way that I'm going to be able to do this, because I have lack of assistance, I have lack of education, I have lack of this, lack of that. The only way that I'm going to be able to get my message out there to the general public is that you're going to have to help me in inventing something that I can use on a day-to-day basis, to where it won't be such of a big deal toward me putting out my message. And once more, God answered my prayer and he allowed for these inventions to come into play, to the degree that now whenever I write up a letter, even though I may not grammar it right, even though I may not spell every word right,
Arizona as well. Blue.
Pertaining to my English, I can still get it close enough that the majority of people, can read through the lines,
prosecution.
and they can halfway figure out towards what I'm trying to talk about, even though I don't have that skill level. I wasn't taught to have that skill level. I was beat on. I was abused. I had to stay on farming equipment until 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night sometimes, and either putting in crops or taking out crops. I had to live in an environment where our nerves was constantly shot, where we was being screamed at and yelled at, and had to take on not only physical abuse, but not only emotional and psychological abuse, but also physical abuse. That's the type of environment that I was raised up in, and that's the type of environment that the same people that I just got through mentioning that was pallbearers in my brother's grave, they knew what our family was going through, along with probably another 100 people that at the time that was living here, that most of them are already dead now. They knew, but they didn't care enough about us to call my father's hand or to make that subtle telephone call by saying, you know what, we got somebody down here that y'all need to come down here and deal with. This guy is nothing but a loose cannon. He's abusing his family. He's abusing his wife. And of course, my mother and I, before I really started working in the public, before I got 16 years old, went to Martin, Tennessee, and tried to actually get help from social services. We explained to certain people that was supposed to have been the experts in taking care of these type of matters and what was going on in our lives. And according to him, he drove out here and he seen what was going on and seen the conditions and heard my father screaming and yelling. And within a matter of minutes, got back in his vehicle and left like a scalded dog. Wasn't going to have anything to do with it. Left us, abandoned us at our own despair. Thanks again. Good luck to each and every one of us. We hope you got something out of this particular message today. Want to say God bless you for your prayers, your time, and your interest. God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless this particular election that I'm sure will have a profound effect upon the presidential election 2 years from now. But this will basically be the last message that I put out to the American people or the world before this election. So I want to wish both parties good luck in where they go. And hopefully putting it into the hands of the Lord that the right people will come in power for the betterment of the good pertaining to the world. And hopefully we as a society can learn to compromise and to get along and to work things out in more of a diplomatic type way and understanding each other's needs and wants and trying to meet one another in the middle to the degree of seeing that true utopia or peace, that revival that will lead into a revolution in the last days towards seeing the opening of the actual second seal, to where you have to have peace to be able to take peace from the world. Good luck to all of us as we end our program by saying shalom, God bless, and may heaven help us all.
Interviews with legendary journalist Bob Woodward, recorded in 2019 and 2020.
It's the party of strength and common sense, both. You know, I don't say.
Who's the heir?
And I'll tell you what, the heir will have to be determined. That's to be determined. But as an example, the Republican Party has always been known for disloyalty to each other. Okay, they always broke up. I will say this, and this isn't a threat, because it's not a threat, but if they went against me, they all lose their election. Even if they lost 5% of my voters, because nobody has a basis like that.
Joining me now is Bob Woodward, the Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporter and associate editor. The Trump tapes, the audio of his interviews with Donald Trump, is out now. So you've got 20 interviews here, over months and months, and they're fascinating. Why release them now? What motivated you?
Well, because I listened to them earlier in the year and discovered that the audio is so powerful and revealing. And the example you cite there, he says it's not a threat, but of course it is a threat. And I think one of the things now before Tuesday's upcoming election is that Trump is on the ballot. His name is not there. But when they do the exit polling and the entrance polling on Tuesday, they're going to find out that lots of people were there voting for him or against him.
And in fact, according to a new New York Times analysis, there are more than 370 election-denying Republicans on the ballot. Those are people either following his lead or wanting his embrace, or thinking that it's popular. In June of 2020, you asked Trump whether he would accept the outcome of the election, and this was months ahead of January 6th. Let's listen.
Well, we're going into the election. Everyone keeps asking, suppose it's a close election and it's contested. What are you going to do? Everyone says Trump is going to stay in the White House if it's contested. Have you?
Well, I don't want to even comment on that.
Sure.
I don't want to comment on that at this time. Hey, Bob, I got all these people. I'll talk to you later on tonight because I have to go because of
He wanted to get out of there. What's so interesting, I should have followed up on that. I asked him in these interviews 600 questions, and it's the one time he said, I don't want to comment. And obviously there was in his mind, and maybe organizationally, the intent of not staying or disputing the election as he does until this day.
Now, this is timely, with North Korea firing the most missiles in any one day, the day before yesterday, and then again last night, several more, including an ICBM that did fail. But in any case, Kim Jong-un unleashed, and on the brink, most people expect, of his first nuclear test in 5 years. You, of course, at the height of the great love fest between Trump and Kim Jong-un, asked him about the letters from Kim Jong-un, which were found at Mar-a-Lago. Let's watch or listen.
Nobody else has them, but I want you to treat them with respect. I understand. And don't say I gave them to you, okay?
Okay.
But I think it's okay. Normally, I wouldn't have given. I wasn't going to give them to Bob. Would you make a photostat of them or something?
No, I dictated them into a tape recorder.
Really?
Yes. And my assistant.
But you were surprised by them, right?
Yes, because
I never saw these.
There are 11 of them, and it shows an evolving relationship of being tough and.
He wants to get along.
Owning.
What did you take from the fact that those are among the documents he brought to Mar-a-Lago?
Well, he really nurtured this relationship with Kim Jong-un, and we should remember, not only does he have nuclear weapons, they are concealed, they are hardened, they are dispersed. The Pentagon and the intelligence community deeply worried, traumatized about Trump's relationship with Kim Jong-un. And I think as I tried to think about these tapes and listen to them, it addresses the question, does he understand the presidency? You cover foreign affairs, and the idea that you have this president who has no experience, really won't listen to other people. And when I asked, what are you trying to do here, drive Kim to the bargaining table, he said, well, no, it's instincts. Well, we all have instincts. The dangers that we had at that time. We're going to learn more in history, and now it's visited upon us again. So what would Trump do as president again lingers in a big way, and I think needs to be the focus of as much reporting as possible.
Which is another reason for releasing the audio tapes, to show these conversations, to let people hear them and experience them. So, obviously, in your experience, Richard Nixon resigned under pressure because of criminal behavior that was going to lead to impeachment. He was persuaded by Republican Party leaders, Hugh Scott and Goldwater, to step down before he was.
Yes, Goldwater.
Well, he was impeached, but he would have been convicted by the Senate.
Yes, and there's one of the scenes Carl Bernstein and I found is that Goldwater went to Nixon at the end. As you say, he knew he was going to be impeached, and Nixon's kind of, how many votes do I have, Barry? And Barry, in one of the courageous moments, said, Mr. President, I've counted, and you have 5 votes, and one of them is not mine. And the next day, Nixon announced he was resigning.
That's so extraordinary, because how do you compare Donald Trump and his attitude towards the law and towards the office of the presidency and Richard Nixon?
Well, you could write books on that. And history's going to be debating it. But what Trump, the big difference is, I've done these audios. People have asked about the interviews that were done, the Frost-Nixon interviews in the 70s. And Nixon then couldn't run, but Trump could run. I believe from my reporting and others, he is going to run. And so Biden rightly raises the issue of democracy, but I think it sounds abstract to people who are struggling with crime and inflation. The real question is, what would Trump do as president?
Well, and this time he would have a team of people around him who know the ropes, who would not as inexperienced as those he initially brought in.
Precisely. He would not nominate people who are their own boss. He wants total loyalists in the White House and the cabinet if he's there again.
No more Jim Mattis's. Bob Woodward, as always, thank you. The audio is the Trump tapes, and fascinating stuff.
Thanks.
And